Welcome to a special crossover episode of Second Opinion and The RAFT, in which we will review Season 4 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Second Opinion is a reviews show from The Nexus, and The RAFT is an MCU fan podcast, and we are teaming up in order to bring you the best review of Season 4 that we possibly can. Find the show notes of this episode at thenexus.tv/SO19. So, Tyler and Will.
Hi.
Hello.
I am super excited to join you guys for this episode because I've been listening to you guys for the better part of this school year.
Heck yeah. Our only fan.
It's, that seems to be what happens to me all the time. I get really invested in a podcast, like a smaller podcast, and then I end up like guesting on the episode, and then I end up taking over the network. That's what happened to me over on the Nexus.
Sweet.
That's funny.
It's appreciated.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, doing crossovers is super fun because then we can, even though we don't have very large audiences, we get people exposed to different shows.
Yeah, like, hey, you could double our audience. Like, 2 people
Yeah.
decided, next Wednesday to just hop over, give it a listen. Boom. We're suddenly exponential increase in popularity. It'll be magical.
So definitely, if you're interested in lots of other Marvel stuff, definitely keep listening to The RAFT. And if you're interested in reviews of all sorts of things, not just TV shows, but including like movies and games and hardware, software, all kinds of stuff, come on over to Second Opinion and give us a listen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll be posting this episode on our podcast. And this podcast, for our one audience member who isn't you, is posted on his thing. And yeah. So for people who don't listen to us but listen to you, which is more than the opposite, we review every Marvel thing that is under the MCU banner. So not so much X-Men, but every episode of S.H.I.E.L.D. we did this season. And then so far we've done the movies that have come out since the 4th season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. when we kind of started. So yeah.
And the Netflix shows.
Yes, yeah, those as well. So we have done Luke Cage and Iron Fist so far. We might go back and do roundups of the other ones that are already beforehand. We're going to definitely do Defenders. Yeah, sweet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And of course, not only reviews, but you guys also do Marvel news every week. So what do we got coming at us this week, Tyler?
Right. Now we do Marvel news. It's a lazy roundup of just stuff I found on Twitter relating to Marvel, particularly movies. The only S.H.I.E.L.D. related thing I found was IGN's review. I don't love IGN, but who cares? They said Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 4 was the best season yet. And they gave it 8.8.
Nice.
Which they loved it, I guess. 8.8. Solid, best season ever, whatever. IGN, you're crazy. They did although I've noticed, we've mentioned this, and a lot of people reviewing mention this. This isn't a spoiler or anything. The pod system of this season, the kind of 3 chunks, a lot of reviewers liked that, so that's interesting. There's been a lot of Inhumans news. Because at the end, this is a spoiler, I guess, at the end of this season, there was a tiny teaser of just audio only for the Inhumans show that's going to be playing before the next season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. In its kind of time slot, I guess. The first 2 episodes are going to be in IMAX as kind of a movie. It's a very strange thing they're doing. But apparently, besides some photos of the cast and that little teaser, a trailer of some kind leaked and then got ripped down. So there's a bunch of posts with the link to it, and the link is dead because it got ripped down. But there are photos taken of it. So there's some interesting stuff.
I'm sure there's also links somewhere to it on the internet.
I'm sure it exists in some website that will give me many viruses if I go to it. Daily Motion or something. But the pictures I have, there's a place that looks like the island from Lost, and people running through the jungle with guns, like machine guns. There is some spacey looking stone hallways and stuff that may be Adelan or something relating to the Inhumans, if you're familiar with that. It does look very austere and not fun, which we predicted over on our show. And there is a GIF that survived the ripping down of everything else that I found of, and this is a spoiler, I guess. So beware, Lockjaw the dog who's an inhuman dog. He's a bulldog that's like as big as a bear. He's a bulldog as big as a bear. He has like a symbol on his forehead, kind of like who's the naked guy from The Watchmen. Anyway, he reminds me of that. He's a big bulldog who can
Rorschach?
teleport.
No,
The guy, the blue guy.
Oh, Dr. Manhattan.
He's like Dr. Manhattan, but a bulldog, and he can teleport. So there's this weird,
What a
awkward
comparison.
scene. Yeah, there's this weird, awkward scene where like this guy who looks very serious and is probably the guy who doesn't talk.
Black Bolt.
His name is Black Bolt. Maybe it's him. Don't remember. And the dog just kind of whoosh in from the side, teleport into the middle of a street. But it is a big CGI bulldog. I don't know if it looks great, but it looks like a big CGI bulldog. So it's canon now.
So if it's okay, so if the first 2 episodes are going to be in IMAX
They are.
first, is it coming to TV at all, or
Yes.
do I have to? Okay, so I don't have to find an IMAX theater near me.
No, it is an ABC show.
Okay.
So it is just like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but the first, I
They're
think,
just
2
having a special
episodes-
premiere for the first 2 episodes.
Yes.
That's fair.
And what was that? There was something else about it. Oh, what Will and I mentioned on our show when we kind of heard about where this is going to fall in the season is that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. got pushed ahead till next year instead of coming out in, I guess, probably the fall or whatever. And what I am assuming they're doing is this, which I think is not a full season of a show, but a shorter thing, is going to be at the front end. Whereas, like, in seasons past, we had a chunk of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and then a chunk of, like, Agent Carter. Or a break for something else, and then Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. again. My guess is they're pushing that first half back, and we're not going to get a gap in the middle, and we're going to get this on the front end. That's my guess, but I'm not sure. So a mini season of this, and then a full season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. without a break is my assumption, but I'm not sure.
And how likely do we think it is that the 2 shows are going to be affecting each other heavily?
That's a good question.
Because Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has kind of drifted away from the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in terms of like direct causes and effects. Agent Carter had a little bit more to do, but of course it was like set way far in the past.
Yeah, and got canned.
Yeah.
It's interesting. What's interesting is this was going to be a movie. Back at some Comic-Con, they had a list of every Marvel movie into the Millennium, and this was the last one for like 2019. They kept the exact same title card, like the title design is exactly identical, but they made it a show instead, which I think was wise because I don't know if a lot of people would have watched this as a movie because I don't think a lot of people know about Inhumans.
They
in
would
general.
have. It'd have the giant Marvel logo above it, and everyone would be like, "Oh yes, I've been a fan of the Inhumans forever," and then go see it.
Well, whether or not it would have been successful, I think it was smart for them to not make a movie out of it because it is weird and niche. I think this fits better, and the fact that they acknowledged, because what was surprising is back when this was a movie, and then Inhumans started showing up in the Marvel TV show, in Shield, it was like, whoa, they're introducing Inhumans this early on the TV show. They're gonna have to intersect in the future. Now they're getting out of it because now they never have to intersect. We never have to acknowledge Shield in the movies ever. Not that I want that, but now it's much easier for them to ignore the fact that Inhumans have been around because it'll just be in the TV universe. Yeah, it'll be interesting whether this will intersect with Shield. I mean, it easily could.
Right, because I mean, yeah,
Because
as you
it's
said,
all on ABC.
Inhumans were in S.H.I.E.L.D.
Right, we have a whole
pretty
whack
heavily
of them.
over the last couple of seasons. So.
Yeah, we've got a ton of them since season 2, really. So we got a ton of them. This is kind of not about the Inhumans as we know them, because basically the Inhumans we've been introduced to are the X-Men. They're people that have basically become mutants on accident, and they're like, how do my powers work? And then they freak out. And they're basically just people who live in New York and stuff. The Inhumans we're talking about in this show is a much niche, more weird thing where they're the race that are descended from the Kree mutants, much like these people are. Except they never forgot. They're basically this like separate race that lives in their own weird space colony on Earth. I don't know if it's in space. They're like this high-tech colony, much like the city we saw Mac fall into in season 2 or 3. It's like they live in their own separate society. They know about the Kree. They know about their heritage. And they're in their own little Neverland.
Okay.
With their own society. And they know about the Inhumans, they know about all this stuff. So we got kind of hints of what that might feel like in maybe Jia Ying's season 2 thing, where she kind of has her own colony and they know all about how Inhuman stuff works, but they were kind of rogue. But these characters are canon characters. If these guys were in a movie, they would be their own Avengers team. We got like Black Bolt and Medusa. Sorry. Black Bolt and Medusa, and they're like the king and queen of this kind of weird pseudo society. I don't know, it's not feudal, but they have a king and queen, so they're kind of weird.
So they're not making up their own team for this TV show the way that they did with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
No.
These are all from the comic books.
These are comic book characters, and I think Will might know more than me, but I think when Inhumans started, it was these characters, and they were like kind of weird pseudo space people with alien powers. And then I think once, because there's this weird politics in the movie universe of Marvel, where once Marvel started making their own movies and the X-Men were making their own movies and they couldn't get through that business deal.
Right.
They basically took this old property, the Inhumans, and they tweaked it to basically be the New Mutants. Where like, oh yes, and random humans on the civilians on the street get powers from this Inhuman stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's actually Miss Marvel's in that boat as well.
Now some very popular characters now are all Inhumans. They're basically acting as mutants. But in the comic book realm, Marvel's kind of phase out X-Men because they can't draw in the same audience who were watching their movies.
Right, because they had to come up with a different explanation for the origin of
Quicksilver and
the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. That's a great example. Well, yeah, the fact that there's 2 Quicksilvers depending on what movies you're watching, because there's another Quicksilver in X-Men. Yeah, that's where you're kind of seeing that stuff, and that's where this kind of Inhumans thing got rewound up, because the original Inhumans were these weird kind of space people, but then they kind of made them more humanized, and they're like, oh yeah, they're in New York and they're normal kids just trying to get along with weird powers, much like the X-Men
at a special school. No, I have no idea.
No, they do. Okay,
Do they?
They do, because there's I don't know how this works, but in the comics I think there's like a city called Adelan, which is like hidden, and it's this futuristic society. But then a chunk of Adelan, or like a little like a chunk of it, or a tower that can fly, just floats in the Hudson. It floats over the Hudson, and people who are in New York and get hit by this bomb of a bomb goes off that shoots out the Terrigen gas. If they want to like figure out how their powers work, the Inhumans, like Medusa, who live in this tower in the Hudson, will go and find them and be like, we'll show you what's up, we'll teach you our ways, and they can come in and get some training and then go back out and live their lives, which is actually very similar to what Jia Ying does in the second season, where she has Gordon go and kidnap people who are like, what's going on? And then they go back to the little town, and then they learn, and then they go home. So it's very similar. That's what happens in the comics, but it's super bonkers and really, really weird.
Right, because they're just in the middle of the river in the city.
Yeah, it just floats there. And then it like gets blown up and sinks at one point and then comes back. I don't know. Comics are bananas. It's not worth talking about them. Unless you're talking about Hawkeye, who's the best.
Also Spider-Man.
And also Spider-Man, apparently.
Also Captain Laserbeam.
Yes, Captain Laserbeam in the podcastiverse.
Yeah. All right. So let's bring it on back to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. season 4 then.
Yes, sorry about that.
We're gonna start off hopefully with as spoiler free an overview of the season as we can, which is kind of tough sometimes. We get excited and want to talk about everything.
I'll stop talking.
But we'll let you know when we're going to go full on spoilers and get really in depth with it. Yeah. So Tyler, as you mentioned, a lot of the other reviewers really liked the dividing the season into 3 chunks thing, and I'm inclined to agree with them. I really liked that structure.
Yeah, well, with a 22 episode season, it's 777. That's pretty. I mean, 778.
Right.
That's like perfect. It's excellent, and it's a thing in order to maintain track of like what happens in past seasons, I kind of break them up that way, and sometimes they do break up nicely. And it seems like they just committed this time, and they're like,
yeah, they actually named the different sections.
Yeah, and they named them, which even helps to kind of keep track of all the events, because dang, so much happens in this show. But yeah,
Yeah,
And I appreciated that, like, if I wasn't super into what was going on in one of the chunks, I knew that it wasn't going to be long before we were going to move on to something else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely think, and for the most part, they progressed pretty quickly through all of them, so it wasn't like there was a whole lot of dead time in any of the chunks. I think Ghost Rider was actually the pod that had the most filler in it, but everything else just kind of kept moving along every episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it kept it nice and snappy.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think this is a spoiler, but Ghost Rider also, in a smart way, sets up all three of them. There are little nuggets of information in the first pod that all pay off or explain things that happen in the next two. So,
right. Yeah, even though they were introducing like a bunch of magic stuff in the Ghost Rider one, we also, I mean, that was the first time that we've started to see LMDs being built, right? Even though it wasn't until the second chunk that we were focusing on the LMDs.
Yep, and we even have the framework is introduced in the first pod.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's like the opening scene, isn't it?
I think it's one of the first scenes of the show. It's like the opening scene of one of the first couple episodes where Simmons is like, wow, this is a very realistic lab I'm in, except I'm floating off the floor. Sorry, that's a spoiler for the first episode.
Nah.
Anyway, so they're in not the framework, but they're in a hologram version of the lab. So they introduced that early, that yes, we can make holograms of places. So that way when it all happens later, we're like, not like, where did this come from?
I think that was actually one of my complaints. One of the things I didn't like was how much I would have liked them to have each of the sections more divided. So the first section was only Ghost Rider, section only robots, you know, just because I have a terrible memory. And so by the third chunk, when they're calling back things that happened during the Ghost Rider section, I'm like, oh yeah, that was kind of a thing. I kind of remember that happening. Yeah.
I hope that you weren't very surprised, like that you weren't confused when prominent characters from the earlier sections showed up again at the end.
No, I guessed that was going to happen, but some of the smaller details of how things worked.
Yeah. I also think I really, really enjoyed this season, and I think that this is definitely my favorite, at least since the first season. I can't decide if I like it better than the first season or not.
Oh, first season fan.
But I think that part of the reason that I liked it so much was because I was able to draw so many parallels with Stargate, which was the sci-fi show that I grew up on.
Stargate!
And I think my housemates get really tired of hearing me whenever watching anything, no matter what it is. You know, it could be the Great British Bake Off, and I'll just be like, oh, you know, this reminds me of an episode of Stargate. But this season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. had just so much stuff, like themes that were tackled in Stargate, but like, you know, I feel like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was taking it to the next level this time. I really, really liked that about it. It made me think a lot. It kept me engaged. It was just right up my alley.
Yep, I also agree that Stargate is amazing.
As I know, I've not watched. I saw the first movie. I'm sorry.
The one from the 80s or 90s?
The original.
Okay.
Yeah, with James Spader and
James Spader, who I didn't realize that was him until way later. But no, Will, I know Will happens to be a fan of Battlestar Galactica. I'm assuming there's probably a lot of Battlestar Galactica comparisons given the artificial intelligence.
Right.
Yeah, a little bit.
Maybe not a ton, but
I feel like Battlestar Galactica dealt a lot more with like the religious side of things.
Oh.
Than with
again,
the like.
I know nothing about Battlestar Galactica. I'm just assuming because I know there's robots in it.
The main conflict not main conflict, but one of the main conversations is like, is there one god, or are there multiple gods, or are there no gods?
Oh, okay, never mind.
And they had a spin-off.
I know it's about robots that look like people, so I was making assumptions.
Yeah.
All right.
Turns out there's a lot of different ways that you can take that.
Yeah, I guess so.
I want to get some spoilery zones.
Yeah, I think I'm. We talked for like 5 minutes, and I'm out of things that I can say without giving spoilers. So
yeah, it's like it's a happening show. A lot of stuff happens. If you're not talking about what's happening, you're not talking about much.
I think it is the best season, though. I mean, they just. The writing for the characters, like, I think in the beginning seasons they focus more on things happening than the way characters are reacting, and it just makes it feel more shallow. But this last season, I think they were just fantastic.
Structurally, this season, I mean, I love the 3-pod thing. I think that makes more sense. It just works. I don't think it's my favorite season because of side plots that are bad.
Was it the kiss?
It's everything with Coulson is probably my least favorite season of Coulson, and I'm a Coulson fanboy. For those of you who haven't listened to the Raft, which is everyone, I love Coulson, and he's a character who is no one knows how to portray him because he's never been portrayed once the same. So occasionally I like him, occasionally I don't. And this season they just did a lot of like good stuff and just a lot of stuff I was like, why is this happening? Mm-hmm. And again, this whole season, like the setup was great and the main plots were great and what the main characters did in those plots were great. But although they did do a lot of character stuff, so many of them were like, why? That I was like, Whereas I think if I went back to season 2 or 3, I'd be more invested in those.
I think
they might not be as structurally sound. They might be slower or a little more wonky. But like this thing where Simmons is in space, like all that stuff, those are so good. And I don't know if I can point to one thing in here that I loved as much as some of those things. I don't know. I'd have to think about it.
Yeah, and I think the reason that I'm conflicted between this season and season 1 is just because of how darn perfect it was, the tie-in between Winter Soldier and the show, because like that just emotionally wrecked me for about 2 weeks, combined with the fact that I think I watched The Amazing Spider-Man right at that time as well, and I was like, no,
everything I love is dying.
Yep.
That's the thing with season 1 is I don't like. I mean, I watched the show and I was fine with it. I actually watched it after it was out. I think they were getting into season 2 when I started watching this show. I bought it on iTunes. But the whole first season is fine. But the last third, again, if you cut the first season into 3 pods, each pod is better than the last, and the third is a masterpiece. Like if you cut the first season into thirds, the last third, which is when things actually have a plot, are amazing. Yeah. And Ward is Hydra is one of the best. Like, okay, well that's a spoiler, but if you haven't watched the first season, why are you watching? It's a
spoiler from 4 years ago.
Yeah, forget that. Like that was amazing. I was like, this is phenomenal. This is genius. I haven't. This is gonna be a spoiler for Game of Thrones. I haven't watched Game of Thrones, but I know this, so forget all of you. I happen to know that people were like had their minds blown in Game of Thrones when I want to say Sean Bean, who everybody thought was the main character, dies. Although he always dies, so that's not a surprise. But I know that was a big thing. Like, whoa, Game of Thrones will just kill any character. They're not afraid of it. And I only knew that. I never watched the show. But when Ward is Hydra came along, I was like, that is stinking bold. Because besides Skye, he's our main cliche protagonist. Like, he's the spy guy. He's the guy who kicks the people and shoots the people and does the spy hacks. And he does all this stuff. Like, he's kind of our leading man and love interest, maybe. And then they completely kill that plot line and are like, no, he's a villain. Game changer. Like that, they had no holds barred. So I agree with, I think that final fourth or the final third of that season might be my favorite chunk. But because the first 2 are just like Monster of the Week and not that great, I can't say the first season is my favorite.
Okay.
That was a rant about
That's
season
fair.
1. It's over now.
All right, so we want to get spoilery now on season 4? Let's do it. Yeah, so if you don't want spoilers, if you just wanted to know whether you should watch it or not, this is all we can tell you, man.
Yeah,
make your choice now.
The acting is great, and the stories are great, and it's never slow, really, much. So, yeah, it's a good show. Watch it. That's it.
Awesome. So, on to spoilers. I think so. You mentioned that it was really, really ballsy of them to like take Ward and make him into a villain.
Heck yeah.
I think that it was really ballsy for them in season 4 to take Mac and have him stay in the framework and make that decision that like, no, this world is better for me and I'm going to stay here even though I know it's not real. That like, I always have thought about that choice ever since I watched Stargate, but they never make that choice in Stargate, right? They always make the choice that like, the world that we've built up for the rest of the show, the quote unquote like real one, is the one that everybody needs to choose because that's like the right choice for some reason.
In Stargate's defense, every other world that was an alternate world was terrible.
So's this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know about Stargate. I can't talk for Stargate.
I mean, there was one alternate timeline in Stargate where like they hadn't met the rest of the galaxy yet, and so like things were just fine on Earth, and so like it would have been reasonable to be like, no, I like this world, but yeah, let's not get too much into Stargate. Let's stick with Shield.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I felt like that didn't really surprise me. I mean, maybe if you're comparing it to Stargate where they never choose it, it's more of a surprise. But to me, it's like, yeah, his daughter's alive. Like, no duh, he's gonna pick that.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I was surprised, but also they don't commit. Like, he comes back.
Yeah, and I would have been.
Had he died, I would have been much more shocked and been like, whoa, there's no more black people.
I feel really bad saying this, but I think I would have been pretty happy if he had made that decision because I was been like commitment, like it would have been
interesting. I don't think it would have made. I think the way they set it up, where the world is collapsing, it wouldn't have made any sense.
Right.
And Will and I talk about this on our podcast, where the fact that everyone disappears in the whole universe except his daughter, who's also not real, doesn't make a whole lot of sense either.
Yeah, I started trying to figure out what kind of like network infrastructure they had set up where that kind of like one piece at a time can disappear.
Nice. Maybe his daughter was a child element of Mac, and so they had to. She was based on him.
Yeah, because they did mention that like the code was being run separately on like almost every computing device on the planet because they had like some worm had infected everything and was running the framework on every single computer. So I don't know. I
was wait, I did not remember that.
I think so.
That does sound familiar, but I completely forgot about that till just now. And the fact that you just triggered that in my mind, I was like, that explains a lot of the ending. Because I think me and Will just passed it off as like, oh well, but you're right. They set up where like the whole world was kind of secretly running it.
And that's why they could tap into it from anywhere. Right. I think
we thought it was just on a Dropbox account.
Yeah, we did. That's why because we passed it off as like plot fudge. But you're right, because when it's underwater and the whole base explodes, it's not dead.
Yeah.
Because it's still everywhere. Okay, I had forgotten that detail, and that clears up a lot.
Yeah, so it could be that like different pieces of hardware in the real world are in charge of keeping track of different parts of the simulated world, possibly. But yeah, it all depends on what kind of infrastructure Ada decided to set it up with.
And it's quantum ghost drives. So like physically ghost, like spirit drives. So that's how. We saw in the first act, we open that box that has nothing in it, but it has ghosts.
It has invisible lights or invisible something that can't be seen by the human eye, and then and then they showed it to us.
So wait, were they okay? So they weren't running this on normal computers that they had?
No, they probably were. He's just making a joke.
I think they were. They set up the idea though that it's part magic.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
How much?
I mean, after learning 4 years of college programming skills, I still am just like, man, computers are magic. I don't understand how they work.
Yeah.
Let's do a quick calculation to figure out how much redundancy there would have to be if every machine had a tiny amount. Because like if one person's cell phone gets turned off,
Oh, yeah.
Someone just goes brain dead.
Just like a pot in the corner just disappears. What just happened?
All coffee tastes like nothing now.
I mean, I'm pretty sure...
We lost the code for coffee flavor. It's just gone.
I'm pretty sure that, like, Bitcoin in real life does something similar where, like, even if the computer that figures out the next piece of the chain or whatever, like, all of the other ones have been updated to match, and it's magic. Yeah. Cryptocurrencies, man, what are they?
Fake. We need to go back to the gold standard.
It's all about what you make them.
I really appreciated the way that they were addressing the question of like, we have these machines now that can emulate like human behavior perfectly. Does this mean that they count as people now and they need the same rights as we do, or can we just shoot them in the head and it's no problem?
They kept having that conversation and leaving it open-ended, but in the end, they also killed all the robots and didn't feel bad about it.
Yeah.
It seemed to me that they were kind of drawing the line between, like, here's some LMDs that were built with, like, our current human technology, and so they're using, like, just normal processors and stuff. And it's okay to kill those ones. Those ones are, like, you know, they can't actually feel. But then, like, once you had the ones that had the crazy hologram brains given to us by the Darkhold, like, then it seemed like they were... Like you know, that the writers of the show were kind of feeling like these were real, living, feeling people.
It's the difference between Ada in the first episode and, like, Robo May.
Yeah.
Where Robo May, has a lot more complexity and stuff.
Right,
the problem with that is...
the whole season, Ada was just normal processors, right? She never got...
It's until the Darkhold came up. But, like, the first Ada we're introduced to is just a robot.
Right.
Like, she's just a robot in a closet with no clothes on. And when we ignore that, but she's just a robot that Radcliffe made with normal technology, and she's like, she doesn't even work. Like, she kind of half works. She doesn't really know, like, turns of phrase, and then he kind of makes her slightly better, and then they use some voodoo, and then she kind of is humanized and quantum. Again, they set that up real nice, and I loved it throughout the season. I think they did a good job of making it not too cliche from most other, like, movies about AI and stuff. But then at the end, they make a robot Simmons and just, like, myrtleize her. So, like, without remorse. So then it's like, well, you've obviously just tried to do a thing because you thought it sounded cool and didn't think about everything you set up.
But also, if you can build a robot that can build a human or robot, then the question is, where does robot life begin? Is it at trying to draw parallels between conception and...
I got what you're going.
Anyways.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that kind of speaks to the singularity as well, is like, once we have invented computers that can design the next computers better than we can, like, things are going to get away from us, and what do we do about that?
The answer is blow up the base
Appar-
where they live. That's the answer. Is get all the bombs, get all your shotgun axes, and just go to town.
And make sure you have insurance.
Yes. Which we assume the base has.
Yeah.
Also,
no, I mean, robo insurance.
Oh, right. Yeah. Uprising insurance.
Yep.
Do you think we'll have a space base next season and just we'll never return to the burned out husk of a SSR base?
Yeah, because they keep moving the team around to different home bases, and it doesn't seem to bother anybody. So I wouldn't be surprised.
They're gonna do the thing where they're in space for like half the season, and then they come back and Talbot totally decked out the base, and now it looks all different and more sci-fi.
It's called Talbot Land. And every day is Taco Tuesday.
Every day is Taco Tuesday. Oh gosh.
And it's just the U.S. has just ruined the base.
The security clearance is just one person at a desk, and if you say you have to go by, they just let you in.
Yeah, and it's just Talbot.
It's all robot Talbots running the entire base.
He found the robot cloning machine.
I did
a nightmare
think
season.
In like the last episode when they shoot Talbot in the head, I had a couple of seconds where I was like, well, he must be a robot.
Yeah.
Like, because there's no way to know with this season, with these writers, like, whether they're going to throw us like, they've been a robot all along. You actually don't need to care about them dying.
That's why Talbot doesn't get cultural awareness. And...
Oh, that's why he's just like,
yeah,
your clothes are funny and your accents are weird. Chinese people.
Are you wearing
we're Korean
pajamas
while wearing a kimono?
Exactly.
Yeah, I hate Talbot.
Talbot. What was I going to say?
What's your thought on Talbot, Ian?
I hate seeing him anytime he comes on screen. Definitely more than I hated seeing like them resurrecting Ward over and over again for the last two seasons.
No. They did a good job resurrecting Ward over and over again.
I'm
fine with all of it.
I just felt like anytime that they beat him and they buried him, right? I was like, okay, we can just put that behind us now. and I don't have to worry about him anymore. But then, the writers keep bringing him back, kind of like how it took Stargate 7 seasons to beat Apophis. But yeah, actually, there is an exception though, because I didn't mind seeing Ward this season, because there was a new interesting twist on it, that he was like, he they introduced him as he's a Hydra agent, but then it turned out he wasn't a bad Hydra agent. And so and it kind of fed into more of what they were doing with the whole framework storyline, where we've got our classic characters, but they're in a completely different situation now. And so your situation can like totally change who you are and how you act. And so, good people are bad now, bad people are good. And being that Ward was the bad guy for the last 3 seasons, that really drove home that this can really be true.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting, going into a computer system was definitely a more interesting mirror episode than pretty much any other sci-fi show has done, of alternate dimension, wormhole thing.
Well, and they're like, but it is an alternate dimension.
Right.
It's just a computer, it's the one that we made, but it's still matter. Like, they kind of mash them together. I think I understand why bringing Brett Dalton back 10,000 times should be bad. But I feel like he did a good job every time. Like, as kind of too cocky spy guy, like, I believed it, and he was kind of fun. And then when he turned, it was, like, haunting because he's, like, completely different and terrible. Mm-hmm. And then when he, like, is evil and kind of crazy, then it's like, oh, boy, like, he's burning his family alive and all this crazy stuff is happening. And then he comes back as, like, this alien dude and has a completely different performance.
Right. Nothing against the actor. I love his performances.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes it not feel too repetitive or cheap, is that he kind of nails it every time, or at least keeps it interesting. You're never like, oh, we got to watch this guy more. Like, he's playing somebody else, and it feels like somebody else. And also, I like all of his deaths.
Also, I feel like we should have warned you, Ian. Tyler talks over a lot, and he doesn't mean to. He just does. So you just push past him talking, and you'll be fine.
I'm already talking in my mind over you, and then it just kind of spills out.
I totally understand.
Yeah, I mean, you're the one guy who listens to the show. You know what's up.
And that kind of thing is compounded by the fact that we have the half-second delay or whatever, since we're not in the same room together.
We'll chalk it up to that.
Yeah, there we go. I really appreciated like the not subtle at all political commentary that they stuck into the whole like we're living in an oppressive regime,
fake news,
resistance is justified, and yeah.
And yet she did whatever that tagline is.
Make America great again.
Still she I forget how it is. Persisted. And yet she persisted and still whatever.
What is that from?
Internet thing.
Oh, from Hillary.
Well, I don't know. The internet was just obsessed with posting pictures of like any lady who's awesome, and then being like, and yet she persisted, which is a quote from something.
I think that was from Hillary's campaign video.
It might be.
Anyways,
it's possible.
Yeah.
I
think my favorite thing was like they had used each one of those lines, like fake news, alternate facts, make Hydra great again or whatever. They had used all of those lines in like different episodes, and then there was one episode, like maybe the last one in the framework, where they just crammed them all into like one sentence.
May just says them in the stream.
Yeah. Like in case
you missed the memo, this is what this season's about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's great.
It's interesting how that evolved, because I'm guessing they weren't planning on doing all that stuff when they wrote this season.
Yeah. So when did they film everything?
That's a good question. Well, I guess they don't probably have a very long turnaround, so I'm guessing
it's probably within
they
like
obviously
a month.
Filmed it after the election and everything.
Probably, yeah.
Because that's when they said it all. I guess my question is, when did they write it?
Right.
And when did they go back and be like, oh wait, all these fit perfectly in the thing we already wrote. Quick, shove them in.
They said that right before they started crying on set. All these things fit perfectly to our current world.
Crap.
Yeah.
I props though for not making it feel awkward, because they did say all those things, but they made double sense. They made sense as a reference, and they made sense in context. So they did a good job of kind of making those kind of real world parallels.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember who said it earlier, but Coulson this season was off the game.
Yeah. On and off.
I was thinking that May also, both of those two kind of took a back seat to pretty much everyone else, because May was also like a robot or unconscious for most of the season.
I think a whole third of the season.
Yeah, literally. More. Like they wake up from the framework and she goes, what have I missed? The last thing that I remember, we were fighting against the Ghost Rider's uncle.
Yeah. Right, yeah.
Which is literally a million episodes ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, yeah, because after they paid off, I mean, these are early things that happened to them. But after they paid off, Coulson figuring out how he came back to life, and her shady past, which were both season one MacGuffins of like mystery. Where else do you go with them?
Oh, I forgot about that flashback. That flashback was so bad.
Wait, what flashback?
Of
Bahrain?
No, not Bahrain.
Oh, where they're flirting.
Where they're in like the Russian.
Yeah. It's
space.
It's really like, oh yeah, because we talked about that on our podcast. How like me and Will have hated this love interest thing, this whole plot line, and then because we were like, where did this come from? This makes no sense. Like, he was in love with the cellist and then left, but she's still alive. And then he falls in love with that other lady who we were okay with because she was a fun actor. And then she died just for drama's sake. And now he's on to May. And then we were annoyed with that. And then they made this whole episode being like, it was happening the whole time. See? Flashback. Like,
and also the Russian was there.
Yeah, see? It all connects. Just made it up.
I'm confused about why Coulson is the character in particular that they keep setting up with like new romantic interests.
Yeah.
You know, like other than the like constantly kind of under the radar like Fitz and Simmons, when are they gonna get together drama, they haven't had any other characters really doing anything.
Well, Hunter and Bobby did.
Oh yeah,
and they were great.
And then Sky and Ward the first season, and then Sky and Lincoln.
Oh yeah, Lincoln. I almost forgot about Lincoln.
That's because Lincoln's a boring guy. Lincoln is inherently,
I'm going to glower and crackle in the corner.
Yeah, he's just very simple.
I'm glad Ada killed him in the framework.
Yeah.
They didn't show it, but they were just like, yeah, he's dead.
He works, the actor is on Blind Spot now, so he can't come back. He is on Blind Spot. Doesn't matter.
Now I feel bad that I almost forgot about Bobby and Hunter.
Yeah, they're great. I want them to come back.
They were fantastic.
That would put some life back in the show and some humor because they're hilarious.
The cast was.
Why would they be in?
The cast was too bloated though when they were here.
That's true. That's valid.
I did appreciate when they kind of, I guess they kind of acknowledged the whole like the romance in this show are kind of silly when like Trip was like, you and I must have been together. No. Yeah. Oh, you and I? No.
And he's just sad.
And a little fan servicey, I think, because everybody was like, oh, Trip.
Yeah.
Who's he going to get with? And
I forgot how great Trip was until he came back here.
He's not that great.
No, he's pretty great.
He's fun, but he never, like, he wasn't that fun before. Because when he showed up before, it was in the midst of a lot of drama.
Mm-hmm.
Because his whole arc was really tied to Bill Paxton, whatever the heck his name was.
Yeah.
Garrett.
Yeah, Ward's mentor.
Mm-hmm. Right. Because the idea was they were kind of like brothers, and then but Trip was not aware of the Hydra stuff.
But like the relationship that Mac and Fitz had in like the second or third season when they became like buddies.
Yeah, second season.
Was the same with Trip and Simmons. They had like a buddy relationship as well because they were trapped in the same room when S.H.I.E.L.D. fell, and I liked having that.
Mm-hmm. Well, there was some good Hunter. It was really season 2 where Fitz is brain damaged, which went completely away. But
as it does.
Yeah, as it does. Where he was brain damaged and just stuck on the base, but he was stuck with all these people he didn't know. So that's when like him hanging out with Bobby and Hunter was cool because like Hunter, because the whole thing was they didn't know him before, so they never. There was a whole plot line where I think he has a conversation with Hunter and with Mac. Where they didn't know him before, so they don't judge him. Mm-hmm. So they don't. He feels comfortable around them because they don't treat him weird. They're not like, "Oh man, Fitz is different." They're like, "Oh yeah, I just know you as this guy."
Right.
So that was really good. Oh, stinking Bobby and Hunter were awesome. They were funny. They were cool, and they kind of filled that void, the season 1 void of Ward, because Ward was spy guy who's cool, and then he went away. So then we got these 2 new people who were cool and spy people, but they were also like kind of funny and snarky, and they were like James Bond.
Bobby was the cool spy guy, and then Hunter was the funny guy.
Yeah, but then he was also the cool guy who was like, I don't follow the rules, I do what I want. Or do I?
And then
Are my emotions real? Yeah. Anyway, they were great. I miss them.
Anyways, back to season 4.
Season 4.
My hope is they fly up in a spaceship in season 5 and are like, we're here too, and then they're just there. That's just my hope.
In the spaceship.
Yeah, wait, let's address that.
Sorry, go ahead.
The very ending of season 4, because I am super confused about what's going on now.
Mm-hmm.
These
shows end.
They are in space on their way to bring Star-Lord to the Avengers. That's their.
Sounds like a fetch quest.
Yeah.
Never mind. Go on.
Yeah, I mean, like, who are these people? Who they like? They knew. Like, I mean, Coulson seemed to know that this was coming.
Or is he brainwashed now?
Was that what Reyes was talking about right before he walked through the portal? Was like, I don't envy you. Was it because he knew that they were coming to get the team?
No, that's separate.
Was it the U.S. military who got them and then sent them into space? I don't think NASA has that kind of budget.
It's a third party. I think my interpretation of the ending is, in order to become the Ghost Rider for 2 seconds, Coulson made a deal with the devil, which is going to come up later. That's a later drama. We're supposed to forget about that first, and then it's going to kick him in the butt later. They're at that pub or whatever, at that diner, suspecting the army is going to kick down the door and catch them, which they're well prepared for because they're spies. So they're not really worried about that because they're worried about Talbot getting mad.
Right.
Talbot is still, or Talbot, whoever is representing Talbot in a coma.
I'm just spitting angry. No more Taco Tuesdays for you.
Right. Which is why they're just like eating food and being like, well, we're going to get caught sometime. We're going to have to go to trial. And then these other guys show up who are like not who they're expecting. And that's why they just catch them off guard and zap them and fly them to space. That was how I read it, but I don't know.
That's how I read it too. Is it possible that is the Inhumans? Because
that's what I was just thinking.
Inhumans are from space, and they also froze time in the diner.
It's
possible. So they have some sort of superpower. If they saw Daisy and all the supernatural stuff happening, and they're like, well, let's just snatch these people up and
it's possible. I don't know how actually spacey the Inhumans are. Their origins are from space, and that they're like Kree-ish. I don't know if they have spaceships per se, but I mean that's definitely a possibility, especially if we're doing this Inhumans thing next season.
There was that one guy who was holding the little like green device.
Yeah.
And then there was a bunch of grunts, and those grunts seemed to be wearing fairly normal military gear, right? Am I remembering that correctly?
I think you're right, but also they were very silhouetted, so it's possible that they could have been like, oh, nobody will really notice if they're just in the gear we have lying around. Yeah. But I don't know.
Disguise.
Also, how rude is it to walk into a diner and order some food knowing that said diner is probably going to be attacked because you are there? Yeah. These people did not sign up for this.
They know the guy on the counter. He's a spy.
Also, all of them just diner dashed because they all got teleported away.
They didn't pay for any of those pancakes.
I mean, it's a completely different story from like, crashing a nightclub because, I mean, one of the twins was there. Well, not twins, but, one of the Koenig quadruplets.
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah.
Quintuplets. How many of them are there?
There was 5 of them. Now there's 4.
We had a count.
Okay, yeah. Similar situation, but totally different reasons.
How are they going to get to space next season? Dang it.
Maybe it's just all Patton Oswalt's manning the ship.
Maybe Patton Oswalt will be watching from MST3K.
Yes, him and Felicia Day are just up there.
Oh, right. That's right. I forgot about that.
I need to get into that.
I feel like I would had I watched the original.
I recommend watching Star Crash. That one is so funny.
This of the new show?
Of the new show.
Okay.
I may eventually.
I have all summer because, not teaching. Hey.
Yes. What do you teach?
Computer tech.
Oh, cool.
Yep. And Yeah, I don't know. If I can swing it where I never ever know a life where I don't have my summers free, I'll be happy. I could live with that.
Rad. It's pretty great. As two guys who know something about computers, what is your opinion of the hacking in shows like this, where people are constantly hacking things?
Makes no sense.
I mean, Mr. Robot definitely did it best.
Okay.
Definitely, and it's a good thing that they did because that was the entire focus of the entire
it's a show. About that.
Yeah. And like, I don't know. I always get bugged when not really when they portray computers in a weird way, because I can just be like, oh God, you guys are stupid. But it bugs me when they just go like, oh yeah, 2 hours, I'll hack you up a solution, and it's like, it takes a lot longer than that to even figure out what system you're trying to like get into. Not that I do any hacking in real life.
We love to make fun of the CW shows on the RAFT.
Yeah, we criticize.
And there's one episode where two hackers are like the good hacker and there's a bad hacker, and they're both like hacking each other or whatever. And then the good hacker's like, oh, he's too fast. So then somebody else starts typing on the same keyboard.
I think I've seen this clip.
They did that joke in Chuck, I think.
Did they?
There's a clip, I don't know if I saw the episode, but there's a clip in Chuck where Chuck has to hack something. It's like a hacking competition. So it's like a dark room.
Oh, with Freddie Wong.
Freddie Wong is the other hacker.
Of course he is.
Yeah, and they're just typing really fast. That's all they're doing. They're just like going crazy, but it's pretty great.
Yeah.
I do love that one website that is just like you type random letters and it inserts text to make it look like you're hacking.
Yeah, it's black on green. Or
yeah.
Green on black.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty fantastic. I also, for great hacking jokes, I would recommend the short film Kung Fury on Netflix. Have you seen it?
Oh, yeah.
It's
that fake 80s action game.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
But he goes to this nerd guy, and he's like, I think I can hack you back in time. So they hack time and space, and then he surfs a keyboard back in time.
Yep.
It's pretty great. Through a grid, like a purple-blue grid. It's fantastic. It's stinking hilarious. Yeah. Otherwise, it's mostly just holograms, right? Like just lots of holograms. Like, this is happening because of holograms.
Neon stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's the impression I get. Interesting.
I do like the user interface systems that they portray in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. They seem, not outlandish,
Mm-hmm.
The hologram, the holo table, like I could imagine using that and understanding how to operate it.
The holo tables are great.
Yeah.
That we use that as our intro for our podcast, the holo table scene. And I think one of the reasons they're great is because Iron Man came first. Because Iron Man 1 and then Iron Man 2 has the best holographic interface in the history of holographic interfaces, where Tony can just first of all, it feels very natural, and he can make a hologram of a gauntlet and then put his hand in the hologram gauntlet and it will move as though it's on his hand. And then he can crumple up stuff and throw them across the room, and they go into a thing that says ding, 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 200 points. And that's the best thing in the stinking universe.
I did read an article that was talking about how the interfaces specifically inside the Iron Man suit, there's way too much going on for Tony Stark to be able to comprehend, let alone respond to them. So the person who wrote the article, their little headcanon is that these interfaces were designed to distract Tony, and the suit is what's actually in control, and it's just giving him all this feedback so that he feels like he's contributing somehow to the process.
No, all those circles within circles with notches cut out of it that spin around his eye are definitely important. Definitely vital. Yeah. We're going back to S.H.I.E.L.D. I think it's interesting how the one reason I think a lot of people fell off the show early was that it had a weak start, but also everybody was expecting Robert Downey Jr. to be on it and stuff.
Really?
Well, no, not like that was a specific example. People were expecting it to be very tied into the movies,
right?
So oh yeah, Thor will show up for an episode and it'll be fun, and of course that happened in the first season and then really never again. We got Sif because she's also a TV level actor. She's also on Blind Spot. And when I go back and think of this, it's shocking it even happened. But Samuel Jackson was in like 2 episodes of the show.
Yeah,
which is actually insane when you think about it.
And I mean, and one of them was the pilot episode, right? So that made sense.
Yeah, but then he was in 3 episodes.
He's in 3 episodes. I think he's in the pilot. He's in an episode where they make a joke about putting a fish tank in.
Yeah, that was at the end of season 1 when they had wrecked the
or maybe that's only 2 episodes.
Not the Zephyr, whatever they called the first plane.
The bus.
Yeah,
he saves Fitz and Simmons. Like he saves their lives. Like that's a plot point. Samuel Jackson saves their lives, which is bananas. And I think people were expecting that kind of stuff to happen a lot more. Mm-hmm. And when it didn't, a bunch of people were just like, "Well, this show's not good. It's just about Lowell, the car that can fly," and then they just left.
Yeah, when they had the excellent tie-in to the events of Winter Soldier, I was expecting every time that we had a Marvel movie for things to dramatically be affected in the show. And so I was like telling people, like, if you want to watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you make sure that you are watching it in order along with the movies. And as it turns out, it doesn't freaking matter anymore.
What I was going to say is I think it does. It's not as blatant. Because that movie was about S.H.I.E.L.D., the organization.
Right.
So the fact that it made a huge impact makes sense.
Yep.
But I think despite the fact that they've diverged and they're almost basically separate now, the tones shift every time a movie comes out. Mm-hmm. So some of the small movies, like they made a reference to Thor where they're cleaning up the garbage in Thor, The Dark World. They go to England and they pick up all the trash from that movie.
Yeah, but we don't ever actually see them doing that. They just it's a line that they throw out, right?
No, there's a scene in the first season. There's a scene where they're in England where Thor: The Dark World happens, and they're picking up the trash from the end fight of that movie.
And Coulson's like, why can't Loki and Thor ever send the god of cleaning up after themselves?
Yeah, he says something snarky.
Yeah.
But like that was kind of a small reference, which is not huge, but whatever. But I think tonally they've acknowledged the movies, and I think we see that in this season a ton
with the magic and everything.
Exactly, it's what you're allowed to do. The biggest gun they jumped was the Inhumans, where they just did their own thing, and that was surprising. But including magic, because now we're acknowledging. Because until the movies acknowledge that we're acknowledging these things, they can't do it. So when they acknowledge that, we can do it. I think the fact that we're in space now is a testament to the fact that the movies are going to space. Because we had Guardians kind of in its own little bubble.
Well, actually, when Guardians came out was kind of when they sent Simmons across the galaxy.
Right.
And
they started.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So Guardians was like, yes, everything in space Marvel exists. So it's like, okay, we can shoot to planets now. Cool. But now all the characters from Earth, like the Avengers are going to have to go to space. Yeah. The next Avengers movie is going to be in space. Because it's going to be about Thanos and stuff. Because it's going to be, the big end game. Mm-hmm. So now that we're acknowledging that Earth-based stuff like the Avengers and Thor and stuff like that are going to start going spaceward, S.H.I.E.L.D. is now allowed to go spaceward, is what it feels like. So they're kind of tonally parallel, where they kind of shift in the same directions, despite not really being connected anymore.
Right. Yeah. You can totally watch one or the other without really knowing what's going on in any of the other stuff.
Mm-hmm. But you'll see similar stuff.
Do you think that they do that so that they can reuse special effects from the movies on the TV show? Because they had the sling ring portal at the end of this season from Doctor Strange.
Hey, did you catch on to that, Ian?
I haven't actually seen Doctor Strange yet. I usually avoid going to movies in the theater because I am very put off by the theater system. But and so I've been kind of waiting to rent it, and most of my other housemates aren't really into the idea of watching Doctor Strange because they're angry that they cast a white dude as Doctor Strange. So I need to find an evening where I'm just by myself.
Yeah, right. They should have changed up this historically white character to not be white.
Well, no, isn't he Turkish?
No.
Right? No?
I'm pretty sure he's just white.
I'm pretty sure he's just white.
I mean,
people who wrote these comics were not exactly progressive.
Okay.
Pretty much
they were
every
white and probably
superhero
racist.
Was white until Black Panther came out. And then they're like,
and he was very
maybe
African.
In 20 years we'll get some women.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, I hear that it's a great movie and I need to go see it. So
it's a good movie, and you need to go see it.
Okay.
It's a fun movie, and you should see it, I would say.
It's a
Fair
fun
enough,
movie,
fair
and free Redbox codes every couple weeks.
Woo! I also own it, so if you just want to hang out, I own every Marvel movie.
Oh, nice. Yeah. And I know that you don't live too far away from me, so hey.
Oh, well, you're stalking me because I don't know where you live exactly.
Well, I know that we both live in the Twin
Yes, we're
Cities
in the
because we
same.
saw each other at NerdCon.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I got.
I'm pretty satisfied with our rundown of season 4 here.
I think like 30% was us talking about season 4, and then the other 60% was like, right, the other 70% was
Making
just rants on
connections
everything.
to other stuff.
Yeah.
That's the great thing about this show. It all connects.
Mm-hmm. We probably
all
made more
harkens.
connections though than the show itself does. Oh.
Did I go there? I think we played safe.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. I have been Ian R. Buck. I think I forgot to mention that at the beginning. That's my name. You can find me on Twitter as Ian R. Buck, and you can find my podcast network on Twitter as The Nexus TV.
Hey, I'm Tyler Zabel. You can find me on Twitter at TyZabs, TYZABS. You can find this our version of this podcast and the RAFT on SoundCloud as the RAFT the MCU podcast. I don't know if you'll be able to find it. It's certainly not on iTunes because I'm too lazy to figure out how to do that.
It's not too tough once you've got your RSS feed set up, which you already do, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to listen.
Well, you better show me where it is because I don't know where.
And I'm Will Miller. You can find me on Twitter at WillerXXMiller.
Have a good one, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
That was good.
That's how we do.